Welcome economists, welcome to the first video in the first section of the A-level microeconomics side. Now just to explain before I go on to what's on the slide in front of you now, there are 10 sections to the microeconomics spec, and a couple of them will be presented through videos simply to save time so we can focus more on the A-level stuff. And secondly, what allows us to do that is the fact that a lot of this is AS stuff or year 12 stuff, and therefore I call it revisit, and you'll see that as I go through the slides. Now, one quick thing to know is the assessments there. You can see the 3 assessments on the screen. The microeconomics exam is paper 1, Robbo's macro paper is paper 2, and paper 3 is a synoptic paper, a combination of both of them, because of course micro does lead to macro. And that's based on a case study as well. And that's 5th of June for the micro, 12th of June for the macro, and the 15th of June for the synoptic paper 3, and those are correct as of the 4th of July 2017. Now, where are we going here onwards? Well, the first part is actually a revisit section. It's 4.1.1, and every little section is within this element. So this is all about the basics of economics. So if we revisit the methodology, my advice to you at this point would be to make sure you've got your AS book, your year 12 book rather. You could rewrite it in your A-level book. You would be perfectly okay to be tested on this sort of stuff. So please don't keep it in your AS book and then forget about it. You really do need to be aware of this. So maybe it's time for a rewrite, regurgitation of your notes from year 12, or maybe you want to watch the videos and again just regurgitate from the videos down into your notes, maybe after a couple of watches. Totally up to you. It's also good later on to use the red books, which are for your diagrammatic practice and key term practice, particularly when we get to production possibility curves. So what are we looking at immediately? Well, we've got the economic methodology and just the understanding that economics is a social science that involves economic agents. There are 3 major types of agent that we deal with throughout, and you'll be used to these. As we get a little bit further into the micro spec, we'll also throw in trade unions, for example, but not many other agents. So the point of these 3 is you must be able to define who they are, and also just display an awareness of how they get involved in economics, but that will be very, very clear to you. So don't really need to go too much into why it's a natural science or not. Sorry, a social science, not a natural science. But we do need to understand positive and normative statements. And I would urge you to just have a read of this slide and then click on the link. You will get these slides to listen to a fisherman from the northeast of England speaking about the situation of fish stocks in the sea, and try and pick out which of his statements are positive and therefore can be proven by data, and where perhaps the gentleman gets a little bit normative in his statements, where he tends to then give his opinions, obviously laden with his own values. It's an interesting BBC News, and I could have chosen many different articles, but that will enable you just to get a little look into the difference between positive and normative. There is, of course, a slide which you probably saw with your year 12 teacher, and you can have a look at those and again make up your own mind as to whether they're positive and normative. So a bit on positive economics there. I've said it can be tested by data. That's the key thing there. It's absolutely factual. It can be tested by data. If we do this, it will lead to that. That's generally what positive economics is. Normative statements is when you give a value judgment. You'll say, oh, this is better than that for some reason. Okay, and that of course can't be proven by data. But what you will find is that value judgments, which are within normative statements, where your beliefs guide what you say, they're actually very important in playing a role in political judgments, and of course moral judgments as well. Some things we cannot get away from. And I like this video here because this shows how the use of both positive and normative statements is commonplace in legislation and in government policy, and also the reasons why they're used. It's very short. Check it out, and I think you'll be able to see why both types are important. Going back into the next section, after the methodology comes the nature and purpose of economic activity. This is very, very short and sweet. Just explains about Economic activity is about the production of goods and services to satisfy needs and wants. The problem, of course, is that resources are scarce, but wants are infinite. There's a couple of very basic slides there that you can pause and have a look at. So the key decisions as a result of that, as a result of the economic problem, is that we need to decide what to produce, how to produce it, and who is going to benefit, if indeed everyone can benefit. That's 4.1.2. 4.113 is all about the resources, and you'll probably recognise particularly this slide here, which captures the factors of production. Now these are the building blocks of the actual economy itself, very much at a micro level. And we will look at those and how they inform market structures a little bit later on. But again, at this point, you shouldn't be anything too difficult to phase you there. Nice little acronym there, CEL, to help you remember those four factors there and their role in goods and services. Generally, entrepreneurial skill is kept to one side because it's the entrepreneur who will gather the land, the labour, the capital, and then provide the skill and the drive and the risk-taking to turn it into goods and services, to turn these three factors into goods and services. And there's some explanation as to what they are. So again, you can pause it and have a little look and see if you understand it and you want to write it down or not. Totally up to you. They also like you at A level just to talk a little bit more about the environment and recognise that resources can be renewable and non-renewable. And obviously, you probably picked that up in basic geography in Key Stage 3, but that's still the case here. And it goes on to just define what natural resources are, energy sources, minerals, livestock, and plants. Now, I don't think those slides are groundbreaking by any stretch of the imagination, but what you will notice when you look at past papers, they do like environmental failure, they do like natural resources and natural industries, or other industries built on natural resources. They do like those as case studies. So it's worth just having an awareness of the environmental problem that is created by the fact that some resources are not just scarce, but non-renewable. Starts to get a little bit more interesting in 4.1.1.4, which is where we look at scarcity and the allocation of resources here. And again, we recognise that because we have limited resources, but there's unlimited wants and needs, we have to make choices. And those choices inevitably lead to an opportunity cost, which is defined as the benefit foregone of the next best alternative. So essentially, what you stood to gain had you made the other decision. That becomes the opportunity cost as a result of you deciding to do something else. So we'll have a look at that later on. And one of the best ways of showing that is now on slide 34, 4.1.1.5. We're going to revisit production possibility diagrams. And this is probably the most technical area of this first section. I've got a great video here. It's a American chap, very energetic, rubbish jokes, and a belt buckle, AC/DC, which still staggers belief. But anyway, it's a great little video, 5 minutes. Watch this. Have a look at what he explains, how a curve is created. He explains the different choices, and he explains the different concepts that exist within a production possibility curve or frontier, depending on what you're used to. Also, just to note, he talks a little bit about constant versus increasing opportunity costs. You don't need to know about that at all, but you might just want to have a little bit of extra knowledge under your hat. But please be warned, it's not necessary for the AQA spec. If you're not keen on American accents, well, then you can actually look at some slides here, and we can have a look at production possibility frontiers being created where the assumption is there are only two goods. So we've got a little case study there, maybe computers and cars, and then we can have a look at this particular diagram here. So this is the frontier. This blue line is the frontier or the curve, and you can see that we can produce a maximum of 1,000 cars, but to do that would mean we produce 0 computers, or we can produce 3,000 computers and 0 cars. So there's always a trade-off here. Also, 3 points are interesting because point A is within the production possibility. What this suggests is the spare capacity. We are not fully utilising our resources, so therefore point A, that level of production, however many cars and computers that would be, is inefficient, but it is attainable. Point B is productively efficient. We are maximizing the use of resources. It's attainable. We can do that. But point C, let's say roughly, I don't know, 950 cars and 2,900 computers, well, that is unattainable. We can't produce that. It's not a possibility. It's outside the curve. So that's not attainable, as the point says. Some of the concepts you can show on a production possibility frontier or curve. We've got scarcity. We have talked about that, and the fact we simply haven't got enough resources to satisfy all the needs and wants in point C there. We've got efficiency as well. Obviously, A is inefficient. Any point on the curve is efficient, okay, as productively efficient as it is possible to be. But anything within the curve shows a waste, some sort of spare capacity. Perhaps it's unemployment, or perhaps there's inefficiency somewhere in the system. Could be workers, could be machinery breaking, or whatever. Opportunity cost as well. This is a classic multiple choice question in section 3, paper 3. And we can see here that C is impossible, so we're not going to worry about point C. We've got B1 and B2. So if I decide to produce B1, I'm going to make 800 cars and 1,500 computers. But then something happens in my economy and I decide to instead increase production of computers by 500. So I do that, and 500 extra computers are produced, so I'm now producing 200. But the opportunity cost is what's happened to the production of cars. I can no longer make 800 cars. I can only make 600 cars at B2. That means I've lost 200 cars. That's my opportunity cost as a result of deciding to create a further 500 computers. That is a classic multiple choice question, and you must be able to analyze and use a diagram in that way. If we just go here, the final video I wanted to show is how a production possibility curve can actually be used to show an economy growing. And again, AC/DC is about a 3-minute video, really good. Gives a couple of scenarios, allows you to pause it and have a guess and have a draw some diagrams, and they'll then explain the answers as well. So please do get the red books out when you're doing any sort of diagrammatical work, and then you can practice these within that book, as well as writing it in your own A-level book. Okay, well, that video wraps up 4.1.1. 4.1.2 is different. It brings into play behavioral economics, so we'll do more of that in the classroom. Thanks for listening.